And that's a great thing to do in a recession. If there's going to be a recession coming up, I told my team, it's a good chance that marketing budgets might shrink up. This is our time to put our heads down and create that much more content so that there's a dip, then people are going to be researching during the dip. They're going to be waiting to buy when they can buy. And when they do that research, you want to be the ones that are researching. So now's the time to market them.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Cashflo Kings Podcast, where we help e-commerce CEOs and executives to make more money, save more money, and maximize their profits. Today, we're talking with A. Lee Judge about supercharging your revenue. Welcome, A. Lee.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited. We've been looking forward to this podcast, been following you for a while on LinkedIn, as you know, and watching the progress of your book, which seems fascinating. So we wanted to get you on the show and talk more about your philosophies and approaches to aligning sales and marketing. But let me introduce you formally first. A. Lee Judge is the co-founder and CMO of Content Monsta, a digital content marketing agency focused on B2B marketing for over 25 years. Lee is a marketing practitioner and creative content entrepreneur. As a speaker, Lee provides training on digital marketing, content creation, and sales from a marketing point of view. Lee is the author of Cash, The 4 Keys to Better Sales, Smarter Marketing, and a Supercharged Revenue Machine. The book focuses on salespeople who need to understand marketing and marketers who need to understand sales, and leaders seeking to build revenue teams within their organizations. That's a lot. Lee does a lot more than all that, but we don't have time to get into all of his extensive background. But let's start out, Lee, with tell us more specifically, how does your book help create a supercharged revenue machine?
Well, DJ, the story behind the reason this book exists is because I worked for years right between sales and marketing. Came from a marketing background, but one of my first large corporate marketing jobs, day one, the CEO sat me down and said, oh, by the way, Salesforce is your baby, and you're going to be the Salesforce administrator, and your job is to get the sales team in line to use Salesforce and so we can see what's going on in the whole system between sales and marketing. And of course, I was terrified. Like, why are you putting this marketing person in front of the firing squad? Because sales doesn't want to hear from marketing. But it was a wonderful thing because it started a 25-year career of being in that position. And through my next 2 or 3 corporate jobs, I was hired for that very reason, because I was able to speak both languages, both sales and marketing. And so what I found in those 20 some years was there were certain things that kept companies from getting to that next revenue level or getting revenue at all. And I kind of over time cataloged these reasons, and it just so happens that those reasons form a really nice acronym. And the reasons were either deficits in communication, alignment, systems, or honesty. And those 4 things, CASH, are the title for the book. CASH is about communications, alignment, systems, and honesty.
Fantastic. Wow, that's a great acronym. Communications, alignment, systems, and honesty. So what would you say is the biggest of those 4, if you had to say, or is that just dependent on the situation?
Well, there is some dependence on the situation, but interestingly, I learned this after the book was done. I was on stage and someone near the front row asked me, she said, Lee, is there a particular order in which we should enact these 4 keys to supercharge our revenue? And I realized at that moment there actually was. It wasn't even part of the plan of the book, but I realized they all build on each other. So for example, the first one is communication. When you get to alignment depends on the company having good communication, not only between sales and marketing, but also with leadership. And when you get to the systems are both the people and the software. And the use of that software, even the configuration of that software, depend on those teams being aligned and communicating with each other, how to use the software, why to use the software, what are the company goals, what kind of reports do we need. All those things come in order from communication to alignment to the systems. And then once those systems give you some output, how do you communicate? How do you understand the value of all that work as it relates to the business? That's where the honesty comes in. I tell this story often from stage and in the book about, I call it the Bluebird incident, where the salesperson was all proud in this sales meeting about this Bluebird, this sales deal that just fell out of the sky. And I was a young marketer. I was young enough to be naive enough not to respect the meeting enough to where I raised my hand and said, nope, not quite. Typically, once you get seasoned, you might not have enough balls to do that. But I called out the salesperson, the sales meeting, and said, look, this person has been in our pipeline for 2 years. Marketing had them in marketing automation. They've been to webinars. They fill out forms for white papers. They watched our videos. They were on our website today before they called you. They've been researching for 2 years, and then they decided to reach out to you. There wasn't a Bluebird. And that story makes it clear how, especially today, almost no deal happens by itself. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. And even when it appears to be a Bluebird, marketing has had their hand in the process the whole way. And not to take away from the skill of selling and the skill of closing a deal, that's important too. So they're both important, but we can't ever think that one happens without the other.
That's a really good point. And even advertising, right? So you can run an ad. You have no, accountability for whether or not somebody saw that ad, read that, et cetera. But then they call up or they, sign up for a demo or whatnot. You can't attribute it to that ad that they saw because you have no attribution. But in fact, it was a touch point. In fact, it was a brand impression.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because we're in a place now where we have to go back to times when we didn't have that kind of attribution. Marketers especially, we got really excited for about 10 years. And I even did keynotes called Click to Close, showing how you could, monitor someone from their first click on your website to closing a deal. That was an exciting time, but now we have to go back to how we monitored radio and television and billboards and know that we have to do this marketing even if we can't closely attribute it to an action. Just yesterday, this is kind of weird because I came from radio, in fact, but just yesterday, I actually stopped and wrote a phone number down from a radio ad. And it reminded me that there's no way they know I did that, right? They won't know when we call this company that we heard them on the radio. Now, whoever is in sales at the radio station, they said, well, we're going to sell, we have 100,000 or a million listenership, but they can't tell you who listened. And we were okay with that for decades. And so we've gotten so used to tracking everything and attributing everything. We're being forced to go back to that. And some companies are really struggling. They're giving up on things because they can't track it, which is sad.
And you're right. There's a big trend. In fact, you probably see it on LinkedIn. I see it all the time with digital marketers now saying, oh, wait a minute, branding, advertising, awareness.
Yes.
We got to get back to that. we have to understand how to advertise like we did 20, 30 years ago.
Yes, branding. And I did an interview a few weeks ago with Rand Fishkin. He was on my podcast, The Business of Marketing. And Rand is evangelizing this phrase of zero-click marketing, which is a great phrase for big truth. And it's that he even mentioned the Coca-Cola billboards back in the day. He's like, there was an experiment or a A/B test with Coca-Cola, but they had one small town with a large Coca-Cola sign and one small town without. They knew they sold more Coca-Cola in the town with the billboard. Could they say which horse and wagon or which car drove by the billboard? No, but they knew the billboard worked. They could give some attribution because it was here and it wasn't there. And that's where we're headed back to. But that doesn't make it comfortable for the CRO or CFO to say, look, we need to do these things. The next question is, show us who clicked it or who saw it. We're going to lose that ability. And we just have to know what good marketing looks like and trust that it works.
Yeah. Speaking of that Coca-Cola ad, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Intel chip was actually tested and released through a billboard campaign in Denver, Colorado. Same idea. They ran a series of billboards in Denver, only in the Denver market, because as you know, it's geographically isolated. It doesn't have any neighboring cities, so there wouldn't be any spillover. And they ran this campaign for a series of months. And what they found was people were coming into computer stores asking for what? The Intel chip.
Intel chip.
Doesn't have the Intel chip. So that's where the Intel chip inside campaign came from. If you remember seeing those stickers for many, many years.
Intel Inside. It was always on, even when you bought the laptop, it had it on there.
That's right. Well, it came from this campaign because people were asking for the Intel chip because of the billboards they saw in Denver. And then they rolled it out as a national campaign.
Yeah. And so I think organizations we are in the middle of a transition. We're having to educate the executives who are in power now that things have changed very rapidly. I mean, again, it was only 3 years ago when I was on stage preaching to click to close. Now it's embarrassing to say that I even attempted to say that because it was true then. Today, it's not. Today, there is some clickable, trackable attribution, but the majority of it is not. And so we have to figure out, how do we as salespeople and marketers, come up with reporting that supports our worth and our work in ways that they're not one-to-one. I mean, marketing is it's not coin operated like advertising. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see more advertising happening just because of the fear of we need to show every penny, to the point where companies are going to lose some money probably on spending money on what they think they can track, as opposed to marketing, which can have a much higher ROI. We tend to go towards things we can measure. Even if we get low numbers, we'd rather measure and get low numbers than take a risk and get high ones. That's business, I guess.
It's CYA.
Yeah. Yeah,
unfortunately.
You got to cover. It is. Yeah. And you don't want to get fired. And so if you can say, look, I moved the needle 5%, maybe you can keep your job. But if you take a risk in an attempt to move it 80%, if you're successful, if you get enough leeway to do that, great. But the sad part is that not enough people, not enough companies take that chance to go far enough to get that 80% move. They just, let's just be safe and just get this 5% we can track.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Last story, and then I know Scott's got a burning question, but back in the Depression, right? The Great Depression. I started doing research going back to the Great Depression, and I tracked every recession since.
You really are old, DJ.
I know, right? I'm really old. But I look good. Come in. Tell me I look good.
What was your experience there?
So, long story short, all the brands that continued to advertise through the Great Depression came out way ahead in terms of market share and continued growth. So take example, Kellogg's cereal. Kellogg's cereal was behind Post. Post stopped advertising in the Great Depression. Kellogg's doubled down. Kellogg's way outpaced Post, and Post never caught back up. Never caught back up.
Yes.
Kellogg's has always been the number one cereal brand ever since, even though they went into the Depression way behind. Ford and Chevrolet, same thing. There's a beer brand, I can't remember which one, same thing. A cigarette brand, same thing. Every brand that doubled down or continued to advertise during the recession, when the other ones backed out or backed down, well, the ones that continued to advertise have become market leaders ever since. And they just kept that momentum going. So there's a great example of just pure awareness, advertising, branding to drive top of mind awareness and brand preference in any kind of market condition.
Let's go back to sales and marketing. You're kind of in this unique position where you see both sides. If you were sitting with a sales team and a marketing team, what would you tell them to be able to help them work together better?
My goal when I have a talk or a workshop is to help show them that this is one team. I'm not very good at sports analogies, but I know that you don't really hear that, this game was won because of defense or because of offense. It took both of them to do something because the team won. And that's, that's the first thing to start breaking the ice. But then you can show numbers to where, like the Bluebird incident, there are people, not especially, but in this case, salespeople who come in and think Bluebirds actually exist. So you have to show them, yes, I see what you're seeing, but let me explain what's really happening. Like, let me show you what marketing does, because oftentimes I find that the communication part is so weak in some companies that they don't even understand what the other team does. I mean, marketing may not have a respect for the art of the deal to close deals, and sales doesn't realize how much work marketing does. Too often, the marketing team is the make it pretty department. Like, here, take this PowerPoint, make it pretty, or update the website. They don't realize that marketing is, one, understanding who the market is, who we can sell to, who's available for us to address in this market. That's the first part. And then understanding how to communicate with them, and then finding them, and then communicating with them to warm them up. Because the customer journey today is the customer's journey. It isn't ours, it's the customer's. And in order for them to have that journey, we hope that we can put some bricks on the road in front of them, that when they take that journey, our information is what they find. So while they're doing their research, it's our information. And this is marketing's job to do that, to make sure that along the journey, that customer is learning from us and not our competitor. Now, where sales comes in is that if marketing doesn't get feedback from sales as to what to put in that journey, they could be on the wrong path. They could put the customer on the wrong path. So I always encourage, in the first chapter of my book, actually, when you're in marketing, get into the sales meeting. Find out when the CEO says, "So Jim, how's your pipeline going?" And Jim gives some objections he got from his customers. Take note of those objections, because those objections are two things. One, it's a great piece of content for you to put out there in that path of that customer who's researching. And two, you can create a tool for that salesperson to say, you know what? If we just had this video to explain that thing better, maybe he could just say, you know what? I understand you, customer. I see why you're anxious about buying this particular product. Let me show you this video to give you some more insight. Basically, it's still their journey. Like, I can't tell you what to think, but I can give you some information to help you along the journey. So the best content for marketers comes from the frontline experience from sales. So this is just examples of the conversations we want to have to show each team how it's important for you to work together, because your job gets much better. You will be more successful if you understand the other team and become one team. And one more thing I'll add too, I gave an example yesterday where we had a salesperson who was like, I'm not going to put this information in Salesforce. That's administrative work. I need to go out there and close some deals. But that same salesperson comes back and says, you're giving me crap leads. Well, the reason they were getting crap leads is because they didn't put any information in the CRM as to what worked and what didn't work. So how is a marketer to know who to go after if he doesn't know what doesn't work, right? And so those crap leads were because there wasn't a closed communication loop between marketing and sales. And so if sales puts it in the CRM, then they can get better scoring. You show me a sales team who doesn't like scoring, I'll show you the same sales team who doesn't put data in the CRM. Because the scoring doesn't mean anything, right? If you don't know what deals closed and why, you don't know what deals to go after. So those are the conversations I have in those rooms with sales and marketing together.
I love that.
Well, that leads into another question. So obviously you're a speaker, you're a coach, a consultant, an author, but you also own this company, Content Monsta. So tell us a little bit about what makes your approach, your strategy, your philosophy to content unique and different. And what kind of success have you had?
Interesting enough, there's a crossroads between my sales and marketing work now and the origin of Content Monsta. I was a marketing director at this company and I needed some content to help sales. I was building some sales enablement because even though I was in marketing, I reported to the CEO who was a salesperson by trade. And so everything I did had to prove an ROI at that time, or even now. So what I did was I began creating video content of our salespeople. And at that time, I needed the video. And I said, you know what? Instead of going out and getting a crew to come in for this test I want to do in marketing, I'll just do it myself. I've got a background in audio video production, so I did it myself. And so we began by just having a conversation with our sales team. And from that, we got these most unique, like natural SEO rich conversations where they would say things in our customer's language. They would say things the way the customer was expressing their pains and their problems. And along the way of explaining their experience with the customers, they were also providing value for the next customer. To say, you know, I was speaking with a customer yesterday and they had this problem, and it turns out that this thing we provide was a great solution for them. Now, and that could be done in a way that's not a sales pitch. It's just, hey, I'm the trusted advisor for this person. And then the listener or the viewer ends up realizing, wow, I trust what they're saying too. Let me check this company out. So long story short, I began creating this content with salespeople. And then another company reached out to me on LinkedIn, oddly enough, and said, hey, Lee, who created that video for you? Was it an agency, outhouse, or was it you in the company? I said, well, kind of both, because I did it on my own accord with my own equipment and experience, but I am the marketing director for this company. And they said, well, can you do that for us? And there was no conflict of interest. So I did that for another company. They became my first client for Content Monsta. So this was 2017. And so since 2017, we've been focused on creating this kind of content that supports both the sales and marketing cycles. And most of it is talking head expertise, whether it be from the CEO or a customer or the technician, the programmer, the person who made the thing. We capture those conversations. And in capturing that, we were doing at first on-site video production. We would carry cameras on site and everything. And then we thought, how can we expand further and do more outside of, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. We were traveling outside the state. It got to be where it wasn't even cost effective for us or a customer. We said, how can we do this remotely? So we began figuring out remote podcasting, remote video production, everything remote. We had it figured out, had it down to a science, hadn't really thought about marketing it as a company or as a service. Then the pandemic hits. All of a sudden, everything's remote. And so business exploded at that point, doing lots of remote. And so we decided to cut off anything in person. So now everything's remote. And that turned out to be our competitive edge, because now we could do, a host in Dallas and a guest in Japan and still bring those experts together. And so that, back with our sales and marketing experience, is kind of the whole nutshell of what Content Monsta is.
Yeah, that's a great USP. Okay, well, last question, Lee. This is our $1 million question, our signature $1 million question that we ask every client.
That's some big cash there. I like that.
That's some serious cash. So, as an expert in your field, what's the one thing you would recommend that a e-commerce website do today to dramatically move the needle?
E-commerce is or can be a short sales cycle. You're deeper in this than I am, but I would guess from the e-commerce that I've participated in, the sales cycle is way different from, selling a large enterprise software where it takes a buying committee to make the purchase, right? But e-commerce, you tend to have shorter sales cycles. And so you can talk more to the customer, more to their immediate concerns, fears, and wants, and get a reaction out of them. So in this case, your communication will be a lot closer with the individual customer. Like, what is it that you want? What is it that makes you click that button? Like, what is that last step? I did an interview a few weeks ago with Nancy Harhut. She's a master of behavioral marketing. You know about Nancy.
Oh, yeah.
And so even for us, even though we have a service that is a longer sales cycle, it still comes down to, do you click that button? Right? Whether or not you're pulling your credit card out to finish the purchase, or pulling out, you're just clicking it to make a demo call, it still comes down to, how do you communicate to that customer the need to make that action right now? And so what I would say, even with e-commerce, is think about how to be the trusted advisor, because that way, when it comes down to that decision to click that button, they trust that you're not just trying to sell them something, you're trying to advise them on the best choice to make. And even if it's something on Amazon, if I'm clicking to buy a cover for a microphone, for example, somewhere along the line, I'm going to go to YouTube or somewhere to find that trusted advisor. If it's nothing but the reviews in that section of that product, how do I find a trusted advisor beyond my own expertise or experience to say, Lee, this is the right decision? So with e-commerce, I would say, think about all the ways to develop that trusted advisor, all the way from the reviews to the people around your company, to the people who are influencers. How do you create trusted advisors so that when I, the consumer, am researching, even if it appears to be an impulse buy, it's probably not. I've probably researched and then clicked the button.
So we'd call that social proof, right?
Social proof. Got to have social proof.
Yep, absolutely. Other people basically saying, hey, here's why I bought it. Here's why you should buy it. Here's why I prefer it, like it. People are looking for that third-party validation, because the reality is, the research says they don't always trust their own judgment. So looking for
and that's
the
a prime example of the Coca-Cola sign thing. Like, it's going to be hard to measure. Like, if you're trying to sell me something, you won't know where I go to get that trusted advisor, that social proof, right? I'm going to go to YouTube more than likely. I'm going to watch some videos. I might type in, for me, so what I do is, if you're trying to sell me a microphone and I'm thinking about your version that you sell is called an SM7B, and I think I want an SM7B, I'm going to put in, reviews of SM7B. I'm going to get a dozen YouTube videos. I'm going to right click and open up 5 or 6 tabs. I'm going to watch those videos. Then I'm going to go back to your website to click buy. The whole process, that whole customer journey, you won't see that or track that. As a company, you have to accept the fact that that's going to happen. So the way to hedge that is, you be the content that they go consume, even if you can't track it.
Yeah. To hedge it, you've got to create the content, right? You've got to create the content, get it out there in third-party channels, websites, social media, make it available to consume, even though you can't always track it, but you're visible.
Yeah. And that's a great thing to do in a recession. If there's going to be a recession coming up, I've told my team, it's a good chance that marketing budgets might shrink up. This is our time to put our heads down and create that much more content So if there's a dip, then people are going to be researching during the dip. They're going to be waiting to buy when they can buy. And when they do that research, you want to be the ones who are researching. So now's the time to market the most. If you're watching this and there's a recession happening, now's the time to market the most.
Couldn't agree more. So Lee, it's been great having you as a guest. Like I said, we've been looking forward to having you on here and talking about your book and your work. How can people get a hold of you, follow you, learn more about your work, your book, your expertise?
Yeah. So my main two websites are, of course, is aleejudge.com, ALEEJUDGE.com. And then my agency is Content Monsta, MONSTA, Content Monsta. I'm not from Boston, but it is contentmonsta.com. And so there you can learn about content marketing, best practices, types of content and how to use that content in your business. And of course, on aleejudge.com, you can find the book Cash, the 4 Keys to Better Sales, Smarter Marketing, and a Supercharged Revenue Machine.
Love it.
Fantastic. We'll put all that in the content notes as well. So thanks for joining us on this exciting episode. We really appreciated it. And obviously your expertise and what you bring to the table. So thanks for joining us on this episode and have an amazing day. And we'll see you in the next show. Take care.